Hey Sopranos fanos, there you go Tom Casey. Welcome to another episode here on Bully Whispers, and we are here today to examine Sun Tzu's favorite power law.
Zoo. Sun Tzu, you fucking ass kid.
Crush your enemies totally in the TV show The Sopranos. In doing so, we will first take a second to look at the benefits of following Law 15 as shown through Feech, who also provides a bit of context to a chapter that's mostly just about killing lots of people. Then we will move on to the consequences of ignoring it as seen through Tony, both with Junior, where we actually see it working in both directions, and with New York, where we see the potential long-term impact, even assuming he wasn't killed at the end of the series, before finishing with the reversal of the law as seen through little Carmine. Now, according to Greene, the wisdom of crushing your enemies totally has been around since Moses wore short pants, saying that Moses learned it from God himself when the waters of the Red Sea closed back on the Egyptians so that not so much as one of them remained. He also implemented it a couple of times, most notably just before he died, when he told his followers who were about to enter the Promised Land that they should utterly destroy the tribes of Canaan, make no covenant with them, and show them no mercy. Now, seeing as how Sun Tzu wasn't Jewish, this obviously isn't why Law 15 might have been his favorite. The reason is because crushing your enemies totally was one of his central tenets in the art of war, which is why Greene says his two main historical examples, Empress Wu and the fight between Yu and Pang, both are from China. With Wu smothering her firstborn child as an infant in order to frame the Empress and marry the Emperor, before moving on to poisoning her niece and a different son, as well as Yu and Pang leveling villages in their fight, it's important to note that Greene states, although not until the end of the chapter, that you don't necessarily have to kill your enemies, just render them harmless and or exile them, which brings us to Feech LaManna. When Feech got out of jail, Tony began noticing some parallels between him and Richie Aprile. Both of them were above Tony when they went away, and neither of them really respected him as a boss, which in Richie's case ended up with him trying to gather support for a coup. But this time, Tony seems to have learned his lesson.
Did I learn nothing from Richie Aprile?
However,
He's well liked, T. That's another thing.
So just killing him probably wouldn't have worked out quite the same as it did with Richie. Instead, Tony essentially had him exiled, and as far as we know, he wasn't a problem anymore, with as far as we know being a key phrase in that sentence. Now, I'm not bringing this up to get into whether or not Feech started giving up information on Tony, or helped set up some sort of attempt, because whether he did or didn't is completely irrelevant in the context of the point being made. What is relevant is that he could have, which begs the question, how exactly do you know if an enemy has been beaten to the point where they are harmless or not? This is a question that Greene offers no answer to, and I bring it up because we will run into it again later. But anyways, assuming Feech did nothing of the sort and quietly lived out the rest of his life in prison, Tony's handling of the Feech situation, as opposed to his handling of the Richie situation, shows the benefit of crushing your enemies totally, as well as an example of how to do so without killing them. Junior, however, decided against taking such a path during his conflict with Tony at the end of Season 1, and instead decided on having him killed. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting, because we can see this aspect of the law come into play on both sides. From Junior's point of view, as soon as he saw there was a problem, he knew he had to act.
If this is true, Livia, you know what I mean, I'm the boss, for Christ's sake. If I don't act, blood or no...
So he ordered a hit on Tony. Unfortunately for Junior, this attempt failed, and just like Greene warns, Junior's failure to crush his enemy comes back to bite him. After surviving the encounter,
your rear, it's disfigured.
Tony rounds up his crew and goes on the offensive, determined to crush his enemy totally. However, after taking out his top guys, Junior is arrested before they are able to get to him. So at this point, does Tony have Junior sufficiently crushed? With all of Junior's top guys dead and Junior facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison, it may have seemed like it to Tony, so he was willing to make peace. However, Greene warns that if an enemy is not completely crushed, then you can never truly believe it's over even if they say it is, because they will be plotting against you, and even if it takes a long time, they will strike when an opportunity arises, which Tony finds out the hard way with Junior. Now, normally when doing an analysis involving Junior, I focus on the earlier part of the series, and while I will reference the end, it's usually accompanied by a contextual acknowledgement that he isn't all there upstairs anymore, so it's not quite the same thing. However, in this particular instance, we are focusing on Tony through the lens of Law 15, which actually makes Junior's mental state even more relevant. Towards the end of the series, from a mafia standpoint, Junior was done. He had no muscle and no money, leading Tony to falsely believe that he was no longer a threat, so Tony continued to remain in close proximity to him. Unfortunately for Tony, while Junior may not have had any muscle or money left, he also didn't have any marbles left, and this made him very dangerous. Now, while there are certainly many factors in play regarding why Tony kept Junior around for so long, at the end of the day, had Tony crushed Junior completely as soon as he knew there was a problem, or even just had him exiled, so to speak, to a home, he wouldn't have been shot. According to Greene, the only true peace and security comes with your enemy's disappearance.
Things are good. What the fuck? Richie April's in the Bermuda Triangle. All my enemies are smoked.
And this brings us to the conflict between New Jersey and New York. Now, let me say right off the bat that I'm not going to go into whether or not New York had Tony killed at the end of the series, because even if that was the case, then it's pretty self-explanatory how that fits in with Law 15. Instead, we will move forward under the assumption that Tony wasn't killed by anyone in the finale and continued with his life after the series ended. If that were the case, how comfortable do you think Tony could really ever be moving forward? Now, obviously, a man in Tony's position is always going to have a plethora of enemies to worry about, but at least before this last conflict with New York, all of Tony's real mob problems were coming from within his own family, which makes them both easier to identify and to crush. With New York, however, he won't have the same level of information, which will make it harder for him to identify, but much, much, much more importantly, he will never be able to crush them. In New Jersey, if he thinks people are plotting against them, he can just take them out. Not so much with New York, and who knows how many enemies Tony made there with his handling of Coco and Phil Leotardo. This brings us to little Carmine, who seemingly goes out of his way to stay neutral through most of this, and, assuming you subscribe to the secret genius theory, provides an excellent example of the reversal of Law 15. According to Greene, rather than beating your enemy, sometimes it's best to let them beat themselves. In this case, it could be argued that little Carmine demonstrated he wanted power after his father died, and rather than jump right into the chaos going on in New York at the time, he sat back and let them destroy themselves while he waits for an opening. Of course, regular viewers know that I don't personally subscribe to that theory, which I address in little Carmine's Machiavellian Monday episode, but I still do occasionally analyze through that lens, since it does seem to be a very popular one, at least based on the comment section. For those of you who've made it this far, thank you, and I'd like to leave you with one question before I sign off. Who do you think is the most underappreciated Sopranos character, and why? Let me know down in the comments. Well, thanks for watching another episode here on Bully Whispers. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.